We have talked about some conceptual issues, how to find what's inside. And this kind of discussion can be found in our textbook called ESRI Guide to GIS Analysis in Chapter 5. For those of you who have the textbook, please refer to those. Next, I want to talk about two kinds of GIS operations or tools that can be used to do the study or analysis on what is inside. Okay? One is called a location query, and this is covered in the chapter 16 of the textbook, Getting to Know ArcGIS. But I'm going to introduce here the general idea, and then you're going to practice it with labs and homework. In ArcGIS, one of the ways to select features is called select by location, and we also call it location queries. In doing the select features by location, usually we talk about selecting one kind of features in one map layer, that using the features in another map layer as the selection area. Okay? Here we show that the dialog box on the left shows the select by location dialog box. When you start this dialog, basically you indicate what is the target they select features from. So you have the choice of indicating which features in the map you're going to select as a target. Okay, and the second choice you can make is the source layer, providing the area of your interest. And your area of selection may not use all the features in that source. If that's the case, you may want to do the selecting those features first. You have a choice whether you use all the features in the source layer or use only the selected features in the source layer. Okay? So you can divide your problem into multiple steps. Okay? And the last question you're going to have is what kind of spatial relationship you're going to use for the selection. When we do this analysis of what's inside, usually we talk about intersect, contain, or completely within. Okay, these are kind of spatial relationship we're going to deal with. But actually, location queries can deal with more than just analysis on what's inside. We can do. When you do the select by location query, everything else is very straightforward. For example, the source layer and target layer intersection or relationship. But one thing that may be difficult for a lot of us is to make sense of the 13 different choices of a spatial relationship. Some of them are obvious, others may not be so. So let's spend a few minutes talking about what are the kind of spatial relationships that can be applied when we do select by location. Okay? Although we have 13 different kind of choices, we can think of them or group them into 4 groups. Okay? One group of spatial relationships deal with distance or nearness. Okay? So for example, one of the choice is the target feature are within a distance of the source feature. In that case, you can indicate the distance as a measure, for example, 1,000 feet or 2 miles. Right? This is a kind of a spatial relationship we can handle. And the second group of spatial relationship we call containment. That includes not only the completely contained, also include partially contained. Okay. Or you can look at the reverse wave relationship. Okay, so if one feature contains another feature, you can think also the second feature is within or completely within the first feature. So they are just a different way to say one thing. Okay? And third group of spatial relationship talk about intersection. Okay? And intersection including if two things are completely identical, or they're partially intersect, okay, or they just came across, and sometimes they are partially overlapping. So intersection involves any of the collection of points that share common point sets. So that's very general. And the last group of spatial relationships called adjacency. It's a kind of special type of intersection, but they don't share much except the boundary. So the boundary could be touching on each other or could share along segments of the boundary. So for example, you can think of one parcel is in the neighbor of another parcel if they share a boundary, maybe a street, maybe a property line. Okay, so that's different from intersect or contain. The possible spatial relationship between the target and source feature is so many, but we want to spend a few minutes on a few very important type of relationship. One is the intersect. We basically use this so much that it's become the most important one. Intersect return the features that are geometrically overlapping, share some common parts with the source feature. Depending on what are the target feature and source feature, you may return something different. For example, if the target feature is a point and the source feature is also a point, the intersect means if there's some of the points in the target actually exactly the same location as to the source feature. So on the diagram shown on this page, we see that those get selected are circled with green. Those are not selected in the kind of light color, and selected with dark color. So intersect between a line and a point is also interesting. For example, you can look at which street intersect with intersection. So the street that actually coming across they share the same points as the point feature get returned. And the third kind of intersect is between points and the area. For area to intersect with a point, the area must contain the point. And the most important or most interesting case of intersect is actually between area to area. So something like a little bit of overlap, those will be counted towards intersect. In the select by location dialog box, you have a choice of selecting. There's two kind of very similar kind of spatial relationship. One is called R within, the other is called R completely within. And many of us have kind of very vague idea what the difference they are. Okay? So here the difference is like this. Okay? If a parcel, a polygon is within a larger area, none of the boundaries of the parcel should be touching on the boundary of the larger area. If there's a possibility that some of the boundaries of the target share the same boundary as the source, then it's not called completely within. Okay? For example, the map on the left, Dallas County, is considered as completely within the state of Texas boundary because none of the boundaries of this Dallas County touch on the boundaries of state of Texas. The third kind of interesting spatial relationship is called R within a distance of. In this case, we'll talk about the spatial relationship of distance. They are not fully intersect or overlap, but they have a distance. And depending on the size of the distance, okay, they may have different implications. In order to do this kind of a spatial analysis, usually the system internally create a buffer around those source features and then detect whether those target features fall inside the buffer zone of those source features. So for example, if you have a nuclear power station And if we think there's kind of risk area of 3 miles around that nuclear power station, and we can create a buffer zone and then find out what are the properties inside that risk area. Right? So the analysis do not show the buffer boundary, but they do show the result of the selection. They return all the selected target that have something to do with the buffer.